Erin Bromage PHD is an associate professor of biology at the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth. Bromage graduated from the School of Veterinary and Biomedical Sciences, James Cook University, Australia, where his research focused on epidemiology of and immunity to infectious disease in animals. The risks: know them, avoid them. Some experts estimate that as few as 1,000 SARS-CoV-2 infectious viral particles are all that will be needed to spread the infection through your body. Now, that means one particle is not going to be enough. It's got to be about 1,000 or more for it to spread. This is an interesting piece of data because it means that just breathing in a whiff of air that has a few particles in it is not going to make you sick. It's got to be a significant viral load of about 1,000 particles. Now, in one breath, you could inhale that many. That's if you're right in front of someone who's shedding a lot, right? You could just breathe right in a breath that's full of air particles they just breathed out in your face. Or you could rub your eye with a single droplet that hits your finger or something from somebody's sneeze or cough, and that might have as many as 1,000 infectious viral particles. So that could get you sick. 100 viral particles inhaled with each breath over 10 breaths could also do it, or 10 viral particles with 100 breaths. So exposure to virus times time. That just 200 million viral particles could come out in a single cough or sneeze. Some of it will hang in the air, some falls onto surfaces, or most fall into the ground. If you're face-to-face with a person having a conversation, that person sneezes or coughs straight at you, it's pretty easy to see how it's possible to inhale 1,000 viral particles and become infected. But even if that cough or sneeze was not directed at you, some infected droplets, the smallest of small, can hang in the air for a few minutes, filling every corner of a modest-sized room with infectious viral particles. All you have to do is enter the room within a few minutes of the cough, sneeze, and take a few breaths, and you have potentially received enough virus to establish an infection. But with general breathing, 20 viral particles per minute into the environment, even if every virus ended up in your lungs, which is unlikely, you would need 1,000 viral particles divided by 20 per minute, which equals 50 minutes. So this is why being in enclosed spaces for long periods of time with others increases your chances of getting this. Whereas being outside, there's so much air dispersion that it really is not that dangerous for the most part, unless you're close to people. Speaking increases the release of respiratory droplets tenfold, 200 virus particles per minute. So this means that 5 minutes of speaking face-to-face could give you the 1,000 viral particles needed, the viral load necessary to spread it. The exposure to virus times time formula is the basis of contact tracing. Anyone you spend greater than 10 minutes with face-to-face is potentially infected. Anyone who shares a space with you, say an office, for an extended period is potentially infected. This is the logic with which we need to approach this. We know that at least 40% or 44% of all infections and the majority of community-acquired transmissions occur from people without any symptoms. You can be shedding the virus with the environment for up to 5 days before symptoms begin. This means you may not know that you're sick and you're still an infectious carrier. The worst places hit have been meatpacking, where it's a closed environment, not a lot of air circulation, and people working in close proximity for long periods of time, particularly in cold rooms. There are now 115 facilities across 23 states, 5,000 plus workers infected with 20 dead. This is serious. That's why meatpacking plants have closed. That's why meat is going to become a shortage, because there's not as much meat packing happening. Weddings, funerals, birthdays, anywhere you're inside a space with a lot of people for a long period of time is going to be a dangerous place. Business networking, face-to-face business networking, like Biogen conference in Boston in late February. So when you're going back to work in the office, this is going to be a major consideration. Is how much time are you spending in the office? How close are you to other people, and how good is the ventilation system to prevent the virus from just hanging in the air for long periods of time, and you getting very gradual, small exposures to the point where it's enough to infect you. A single infected employee came to work on the 11th floor of a building. That floor had 216 employees. Over the period of a week, 94 of those people became infected. 94. That's 43% of them. That's almost half of them. Notice how one side of the office is primarily infected, while there are very few people infected on the other side. So you see, most of the infections happened on this side, just a couple on this side. The community choir in Washington State, even though people were aware of the virus and took steps to minimize transfer, they avoided the usual handshakes and hugs. Hello, they stood 6 feet apart. It didn't matter because they were in that chapel for 2.5 hours for 4 days in a row. And 45 of the 60 choir members developed symptoms and 2 died. How much you're talking, how much you're singing or whatever, and if it's a small space and people are breathing heavy, then that means it's spreading all over that room. Indoor sports, Canadian curling event, because it's a cold environment, 24 of the 72 people there became infected. Thomas Hale, associate professor at Oxford, and his study showed this example of the air conditioner in the room blowing air, and here's one infected person here, A1, and almost everybody at the next table gets it because the air is blowing in that direction. Almost everyone, or more than half the people at his table, half the people at his table catch it. And 2 people on the other side of the room catch it, even they're close to the air conditioner because somehow the air is probably bouncing against that wall and coming back somehow. There's some airflow issues. If you understand the nature of airflow, you'll maybe understand why these 2 people would also catch it. And they're having dinner for what, an hour or 2? So that's enough time. Clearly that was enough time for the virus to spread. German bacteriologist named Karl Flug proved that microbes can be transmitted ballistically through large droplets that emit at high velocity from the mouth and nose. His method for proving the existence of these Flug droplets was to painstakingly count the microbe colonies growing on culture plates hit with the expelled secretions of infected lab subjects. It couldn't have been pleasant work, but his discoveries saved countless lives, and more than 12 decades later, these large respiratory droplets have been identified as the transmission mode for COVID-19. The Flug droplets. They're large, and they will not go through a mask. They will get caught in the face mask, most likely. Droplets typically are classified as either large globules of Phlegian variety, arcing through the air like a tennis ball until gravity brings them down to Earth, or 2, smaller particles, less than 5 to 10 microns in diameter, roughly 1/10 the width of a human hair, which drift lazily through the air as fine aerosols, cocooned within a warm, moist, enveloping gas cloud. A puff that protects the droplets from evaporation and allows even small globules to travel much farther than one might otherwise predict. The binary distinction between large and small droplets remains fundamental. Eventually, the big particles will fall while the smaller ones don't. But during those first fractions of a second, when a sneeze or cough or shout is expelled, Veruba shows the enveloping gas sheath allows small particles to act, ballistically speaking, as if they were larger. So they can move very fast, even the small guys, during a cough or sneeze, which is why you just don't want to be around someone coughing or sneezing, period. Because it'll go through their mask and it can go through your mask. The overall upshot is that such a puff and its payload of pathogen-bearing droplets of all sizes can travel 7 to 8 meters. That's like 25 feet, okay? About 4 times the length of a 6-foot social distancing buffer zone we've all been taught to enforce since mid-March. If they're coughing or sneezing your direction, then 6 feet means nothing. If large droplets are found to be a dominant mode of transmission, which apparently they have been, then the expanded use of masks and social distancing is critical because the threat will be understood as emerging from ballistic droplet flight connected to sneezing, coughing, and labored breathing. We would also be urged to speak softly, avoid coughing, blowing, or sneezing, or exhibiting any kind of agitated respiratory state in public, and angle their mouths downward when speaking. If lingering clouds of tiny aerosol droplets are found to be a dominant mode of transmission, on the other hand, then the focus on sneeze ballistics and the precise geometric delineation of social distancing protocols becomes somewhat less important, since particles that remain indefinitely suspended in an airborne state can travel over large distances through the normal processes of natural convection and gas diffusion. As you can see in this video, most of the yellow ballistical particles have dropped to the ground within a few minutes, but the red ones stay in the air as aerosol, and they begin to move through the room over the course of hours. They stay in the air. And whatever the ventilation system in the room is doing, it spreads it in a particular pattern that hits other people. This is the great danger of the aerosol spread of the virus. In this case, we would need to prioritize the use of outdoor spaces where aerosols are more quickly swept away and improve the ventilation of indoor spaces. So if you imagine all of these viral particles in the air in your work environment, just hanging there waiting for you to breathe them in, think about how much the viral load would be reduced if you have all the windows open and fans on and ventilation flushing all those particles out and away from you. If contaminated surfaces are found to be a dominant mode of transmission, then we would need to continue and even expand our current practice of fastidiously washing hands following contact with store-bought items and other outside surfaces, as well as wiping down delivered items with bleach solution or other disinfectants. So now back to the Erin Bromage article to wrap up. Basic summaries. If you're doing a lot of talking, singing, or yelling, that's going to spread the disease at a much higher factor, a rate of 10 to 100 times as quickly. The main sources of infection are at home, workplace, public transport, social gatherings, and restaurants. If you have to take a bus, my God, wear a mask and don't touch your face and wash your hands afterwards or wear gloves. Mostly if people catch it somewhere out and about in a public space, then they're going to spread it to their spouse or whoever they're rooming with. Got to think about who's your weakest link in your community and make sure that they're taking precautions that are similar to what you would. Countries performing contact tracing properly, only a single outbreak has been reported from an outdoor environment. Indoor spaces with limited air exchange or recycled air and lots of people are concerning from a transmission standpoint. We know that 60 people in a volleyball court-sized room, like the choir, results in massive infections. Same situation with a restaurant and a call center. Social distancing guidelines don't hold in indoor spaces where you spend a lot of time as people on the opposite side of the room were infected. Social distancing doesn't work when you're inside. It depends on the airflow in the room and where these air particles are bouncing when they can last for minutes, if not hours. The principle is viral exposure over an extended period of time. In all these cases, people were exposed to the virus in the air for a prolonged period. Even if they were 50 feet away, even a low dose of the virus in the air reaching them over a sustained period was enough to cause infection and, in some cases, death. Social distancing rules are really to protect you with brief exposures or outdoor exposures. In these situations, there is not enough time to achieve the infectious viral load when you are standing 6 feet apart.